Everybody, my people out there, and wherever you are, you with strong inspirations. Strong inspirations. I like that name. It kind of just came to me one day when I was thinking of doing this YouTube stuff, and strong is my word. I say strong for everything. And let me let you in on something. Strong stands for strength, tenacity, resilience, and a sense of oneness, nobility, and grace. I've been saying that word for about maybe 15 years now, and I just like it. Everything I do, I got the word strong in it. So you add strong inspirations. My name is Anthony Brogdon. I'm a nice guy. How about that? And I'm so nice that I'm not mad at you, my viewers, for not subscribing to my channel. I ain't mad at you. As long as you watching, I'm cool. I'm cool with it. And I know you're watching because the stuff is too good. The lady that is about to come on, oh my God, she good. She gooder and good. So I ain't mad at you for not subscribing. I know one day you'll get the vibe and just hit that button. You wondering, is there something attached to it? It's free. Ain't nothing attached. It just let me know that you're part of the family more so. I know you're gonna hit the like button on this video because she got pictures and books and t-shirts she gonna show you and everything. You're gonna be shocked at all of what she got going and the stories she gonna tell. And then you're going to hit that notification bell because as you might know, and I know you know, I'm uploading 4 or 5 videos a week. And that notification bell just gives you a ding to say, hey, there's a new video on the Strong Inspirations channel, and you want to be maybe the first to watch it so you can brag to your friends and then tell them. And then do this for me. Tell somebody about the channel. Don't keep this to yourself saying, hey, man, I got a little known secret. Why is that? And then the rest of the people sitting there and you sitting around the coffee shop saying, hey, man, did you know this? Trying to act like you a genius. Come on, you a genius because you a part of the Strong family and you watching these genius people. Not saying you not a genius otherwise, but you get my drift. Come on. And then you know what I really want you to do on top of that is watch my movie, Business in the Black, The Rise of Black Business in America. How slaves went to college, Black Township, and that's a lead into what my guest's gonna talk about. That's in my movie. Black millionaires in the 1800s, that's in my movie. It's 75 minutes long. You're gonna enjoy this film, I promise you. And this is the DVD case. I sleep with it under my pillow because it took 3 years of my life to do this darn thing, and I'm so excited, and I know it's good. This is the DVD. You can buy that, or if you don't have a DVD player, which I understand, it's streaming on Amazon. And then the other thing is, even if you like me and you ain't no big reader, you ain't the kind of guy that be reading Moby Dick and all them big books and stuff like that. But a little book is not so intimidating. And so I wrote this for you and you big book people. But I did it in such a way that it's going to blow you away right off the bat. You're going to read the facts and say, wow, I didn't know that. So then what I did was I give you the reference to where I found the fact. All right. And I numbered the facts so it make it easier. Black Business Book, it's got over 200 of them. And Black Townships is in my book, which again is the lead in on what the lady gonna talk about. And so I invite you to read my book. You can read it as an e-reader or on Kindle, or you can get the hard copy. And understandably, I'm so excited. I ain't gonna lie to you. You get the hard copy, I autograph it. And, hey, that might mean something one day because, I'm going places. Watch me. I got things under my sleeve. And this channel here is going to go from now on, as long as I can anyway, to give you this information. This is my way of getting it out to you. And so I'm so grateful that I got people that now they're calling me, they taking my calls. This lady took my call. She didn't even know me. She said, man, I don't know you. I said, well, let me tell you what I do. She said, I like what you're doing. I'll be a part of it. It went that smoothly. And I'm so grateful that she is on my channel to tell you this story. So come on, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And it's a pleasure and honor to be here. My name is Selby Genther Minner. I grew up in East Providence, and then I moved out all across the country. I play music and went to California, lived in Berkeley. And then in California, I was playing my folk blues guitar and singing and trying to get good. And I ran into DC Minner. And he had retired from playing bass for 18 years with people like Freddie King and Chuck Berry. So he watched me for a while. He'd switched to lead guitar, you know. And then finally one day, he let me know how he felt about me. And 2 weeks later, we were on stage together, you know. Yeah, and I already had a bass, but I couldn't play it. And he said, well, I just retired from playing bass, like I said, so I'll teach you how to play it right. And I said, great. So we traveled for 12 years and became a three-piece.
That's folk music, right?
Excuse me?
What kind of music were you playing?
Oh, blues and R&B. You know, he had been behind O.V. Wright and behind Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley, and Freddie King was his friend.
Now, hold on, let me ask you this. This is interesting, everybody. It's a sidebar. I got a celebrity on my channel.
Together, he's in 7 halls of fame. I'm in 1, but from the Blues Foundation in Memphis, it's called the KBA, Keeping the Blues Alive. And he and I together won Keeping the Blues Alive in Education in 1999.
You said you were from Providence.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, born in Providence, grew up in East Providence, and went to art school in Providence.
Island?
Yeah.
Wow. And so now you're in Oklahoma.
Reneesville. I'm in Reneesville, Oklahoma, in one of the surviving Black towns.
Yep. All the way on the other side of the country.
Oh, no, I went to Berkeley first. Yeah, that was the other side of the country.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Now, you in a Black township.
Exactly.
It's still a Black township?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we had an election just the other day. Yep.
They got a Black mayor.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah. I don't mean no harm in this, but you're not Black. So how do you survive there?
Well, now, see, I married in, right? I mean, I'm here because of music and love. DC said to me, we were out in California, you know, traveling around. And he said, I have a house and land that's paid for in Oklahoma. This is where DC was born. He was born in 1935, right on this place where I am today.
Now, how big is the town that you're in?
Oh, it's not too big. It's not too big. It's about a mile. And
the whole town is a mile?
It's about a mile across from one side to the other, maybe less. Well, this is a historical town. Now, see, back in the day, which was in 1850, this was not a state. They gave this land to the Indians. They said, as long as the water flows and the sky is blue, this will be native land. And then they made it, they took their farms and they took their homes and they made them walk over here. We all know about that, the Trails of Tears. And there were several Trails of Tears. Excuse me?
Who walked over there?
All the different Indian people that they relocated from. This part of Oklahoma has mostly people from the South. So it was the Cherokees, the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, the Seminole, and the Creek. They call it the 5 nations. And they say the 5, they quote, civilized tribes. And they had all been speaking English 200 or 300 years. They were all very acculturated as Americans, as Southerners, really. And they owned slaves. The successful ones owned slaves. So when they made them leave their farms in North Carolina and wherever, you know, Alabama, Florida, they made them walk here. Okay, a lot of people died. That's why they called it the Trails of Tears. And they moved here and they were given land in Oklahoma, which was called Indian Territory at that time.
That's a long walk. That's got to take months.
Yeah. a lot of people died, like a lot, maybe half the people in the tribe would die on the way here. It was terrible. It was a
Okay.
terrible experience. And what happened was they brought their slaves with them. A lot of
Okay.
people don't really know that,
Okay.
but yes, they did. And then, and the story I heard was that some of those people, the slaves, were out front barefoot, cutting back the bushes and killing the wild animals, to get them here. And I'm sure that some of that is true.
Yeah, I would think so.
So they
Yeah.
got here and started their own farms. Some of that is in some of that history is in this book right here,
Okay.
which is
The
a great
Jefferson
book,
Highway.
Janita Mullins.
Okay.
And so they settled in these towns and then they farmed. That was 1850. And then, interesting fact, the Civil War came along not too long after that. During the Civil War, the South wanted to take over this.
Civil War, hold on. I want to jump on this. So the Indians took their slaves.
Yes.
They landed in Oklahoma.
All over the eastern half of Oklahoma, all over.
Okay, so now they got the slaves out there. What are they doing with the slaves out there? Are they doing crops? Are they I know they got to do crops and stuff like that.
Crops. Yeah.
What can grow
Farming.
in Oklahoma?
A lot of these were people that were quite settled in North Carolina and had farms. And so that's why they had slaves. And so they brought their slaves with them and continued to farm.
And can you farm?
Yes.
What can you farm in Oklahoma?
Well, if you work hard,
Everything.
you can farm a lot of cotton. And then also, now it's a lot of soybeans. But this place here was the old family farm, and in this little black town, and they had everything they needed. They had a smokehouse. They would buy salt and just a couple of other items, and everything else they could grow right here. And a lot of people in Reneesville got old, and they were very healthy people. There was always somebody here who was 100, and they were all growing and canning all their own food.
Okay. So now when they take the slaves out there, how do the slaves end up developing their own town? Did the Indians say you can't live with us, you got to live over there? And that's gonna
No, that's a very good question.
Got their freedom.
That's a very good question. Before we do that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Civil War, because it was after the Civil War that the towns were formed.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, I got you.
During the Civil War, okay, here comes the South up this dirt road, right? Okay. They come up and they're hiding out, and up about an hour away from here by car is Fort Gibson. And they had sent all the white soldiers to the East Coast because they thought they were going to win the Civil War in 2 years. So Fort Gibson was up there, and they had Indians and blacks up there manning the fort. Well, how did they get black soldiers? That's a good question. Well, the people from Harper's Ferry came to Kansas before that time. And some of those guys in Kansas said, well, here come people walking out of the South to be free, walking to Kansas from Arkansas and Missouri and maybe Louisiana. And these people are strong and committed and healthy. Maybe I should train them and make soldiers out of them. So Major Blunt, just about the time of the beginning of the Civil War, started training soldiers in Kansas. And the ones that he trained were called the 1st Kansas Colored. And they worked hard and they were very good soldiers. So when all the white soldiers were sent to the East Coast from up here in Oklahoma, Fort Gibson, then they let the black soldiers and the native soldiers take care of the fort. So here comes the South, and they're camped out right down here across the street from me up in Honey Springs. That's an everlasting spring. And they're camped out getting ready to surprise attack Fort Gibson. And so people said to Blunt, well, now, I don't know. Do you think we could give those guys the gun? Do you think, like DC would say, if they really gave them the gun, who are they going to shoot, right? That's what DC would say. Okay. So no, Blunt said, no, I believe in my men. So we will do it. So they marched all night, and they hid out and slept for 2 hours. They were outnumbered 2-1 by the South. I believe there were 3,000 people on the side of the North and 6,000 Confederates here at Honey Springs. And they attacked at dawn. And in 4 hours, they beat them. They beat them, and Blunt put out the word on the wire. This is what he said. I never saw such fighting as was done by the Negro Regiment. The question that Negroes will fight is settled. Besides, they make better soldiers in every respect than my troops. than any troops I've had under my command. So Blunt was total abolitionist. He trained them, and they did really a great job here at Honey Springs. Here's a picture of them. There's a whole museum right across the street from me now about Battle of Honey Springs. And these drawings are by Mike Robinson to recreate the images of that Civil War battle. So they say that's the turning point of the Civil War in Indian Territory. But after that, Lincoln invited soldiers of color to fight for their own freedom. And how many do you think signed up?
A lot of them.
Yeah, this was 1863, 180,000. And during the process before the war was over, 40,000 of them died. But they, like DC would say, the South was fighting for lifestyle, which was free labor, but the Blacks were fighting for lifestyle too, which was their grandchildren. So they fought just as hard. And finally, the North started to win. And before the Civil War was over, Lincoln put out the word. It's in one of those books up there at that museum about Honey Springs. Adam gave me that book. He said, well, now you all need to go home and let these Black soldiers fight for their own freedom and finish this war. Go take care of your families. These soldiers are doing a great job. And I'd like to see that taught in schools, you know.
Okay,
that,
I like it.
Because whoever says that in the schools, that, you know, people
like
won
it.
their own freedom. They don't
I
say
like
that
it.
very much. So that was the Civil War. So now the war is over and the Black people are freedmen. They didn't all get freed right away. That's why we have Juneteenth. Some of them, they didn't know they were freed down in Texas and parts of this Creek Nation here where I live. And 2 years later, a ship, that's another story, ship came in from the Gulf and full of soldiers and found that there were still people being slaves 2 years later. And in June, they cut them free and let them go and got the Texans to stop making slaves out of them. And that's what we call Juneteenth. And
Right.
my friend, whose great-great-grandfather lived here in Reneesville, Steve Williams, is Mr. Juneteenth. He's trying to make a national holiday out of Juneteenth, Freedom Day. And he plays at the festival here. He's a musician. He lives in DC. But that's another story. So
yeah.
Anyway, the slaves were freed. And then the federal government, they let the trains come in here in 1872. And then they started letting white people come in because they had given it to the Indians now, you know, 280 treaties with the Indians, and they broke every one. So by 1872, white people were coming in on the trains, the land runs started, and the federal government said, we want to make a state out of this Indian territory. If we're going to make a state out of this territory, people need to be self-sufficient. These people are farmers. We need to give them land. But they didn't, the federal government did not take that responsibility. They put that on the tribes, these 5 tribes. 40 acres and a mule. Everybody was supposed to get 40 acres and a mule. So some of the tribes did better at that than others, particularly the Creeks and the Seminoles, both of which are tribes that are not necessarily such tight bloodline kind of tribes. You know, Seminole means runaway. Everybody that could get to Florida could be a Seminole. The Seminoles would hide them in the swamps. And then the Creeks, they kind of gathered all of the natives along the creeks back east and called them Creek Indians. So those 2 tribes had been marrying their slaves and having families and mixed babies and the whole thing. And so they did give the land. So these towns, the people decided they wanted their land in little bunches, because at that time the Klan was picking up and they had sundowner towns, you know, nobody in this town after sunset and all that. So they wanted their own towns. And so this is the map that the state puts out. And they say there were 50 of them and 13 still survive. But in fact, in order to be a certified town by the state, what you needed was a zip code and land and a post office stop. So these are the 50 that had those things, that had zip codes.
Okay.
However, there were another almost 50 what we would call settlements, where they did have a church and a school, but maybe not a zip code. So it was close to 100 towns. And they sprung up, and up at the university in Langston, the man put out the word. He started a newspaper and he sent it through the South, and it said, don't come if you're broke or if you're lazy, but this is a golden opportunity for people in our culture to move forward and to determine our own futures, to have our own schools and our own basketball teams and everything else, our own governments and our own churches, and we can do this. And his name was Frank, I've forgotten his last name, from Langston University, which was in one of those black towns, Langston. So the schools were very strict and everybody worked very hard. And the statistic that's most interesting about this is that in 1890, people of color owned 1.5 million acres of land in Oklahoma. And that's more land than Black people owned in the entire United States put together.
Wow.
So you can see that this was an amazing, and it was not a state, so there were no laws, you know, yet about Jim Crow. So it was like a golden moment there for about 30 years where people would come, and they'd come with their livestock and their, you know, their wagons, whatever they had. From Texas, they came from all over and built these towns. And later it sort of disappeared after things changed in the 20s, the Depression, and then the massacre in Tulsa. And the first state law was a Jim Crow law. The very first state law was segregation of the trades. We interviewed DC's distant cousin who came here. Her ancestors came here in a covered wagon. DC's people came here following the cousins that had been marched here in 1850. His people came here in 1904. There were 4 covered wagons with 4 Cherokee women married to 4 different Black men. And they came here from Choccolocco, Alabama about 1904. And they brought their first granddaughter with them, who was just a baby. And that's DC's grandmother, Lori Pearson Drennan. But the name was Martin at the time, Lori Martin. So it was Dr. Clark Martin, who was a pharmacist, and his wife, Ann Martin, who could sit on her hair. She's a Cherokee lady. And they came with 4 other wagons of people, her sisters. And that was following the cousins that had been here on the Trail of Tears. Now, the Cherokee Nation was where the cousins were, but they didn't allow mixed marriages. So where Reneesville is right on the line of the Cherokee Nation. She could ride a horse over there and go see her people. And he was a pharmacist. So he set up a pharmacy in Reneesville. And then the next stop down on the train, you know, the train came through here, was Eufaula. So he had a pharmacy in Eufaula. He'd go down there every day and come back. And they prospered and had this place, bought this place, and it's 4.5 acres, and then some other land too, for farming purposes.
How did your town get founded?
There was a man named William Rennie and 3 other men, and they founded the town of Rentiesville. Now, officially, this town was founded at statehood, which was 1907. Oklahoma was surrounded by states, but since it was Indian territory, it did not actually come in as a state until after New Mexico and all the other places around here were already states. And then finally in 1907, Oklahoma came in as a state.
And so these 3 men were what? They were of mixed marriages or what? Why did they?
No, they were Black people. They were people of color. Let's see, William Rennie, he didn't have any children, so they named the town after him. And then DC's grandfather, Dr. Clark Martin, he was one of them. And then there was a Robinson who had to do with the founding of the Baptist church here, and another man, and I can't remember his name. And they decided, they bought the land. They bought the land from an Indian lady named Phoebe McIntosh. And
so when they bought it, how many, if you're talking about it's a mile, how many acres is the city?
Oh, it's very small. They're all very small, but they had schools, very good school.
Let me go back to this. How many, at the high point, how many people lived in your city, in your town?
Well, now that's a good question. Some people say 6,000 and some people say 4,000 and some people say 400. So do I know? No, I do not. Now, when we interviewed Ruby Perkins, which was one of the people whose family came in one of those other covered wagons, along with DC's grandfathers. Okay, great-great-grandfather, Dr. Clark, and Ann Martin. Well, now, when we interviewed Ruby Perkins, she was his kindergarten teacher. She was his cousin. She got to Rentiesville when she was 7, and she said, "Well, now." Rentiesville had a fair, and Rentiesville had, 2 dry goods stores, and then it had a couple of pool halls, and she told the whole story.
Yeah.
And it was all around one square there in town, which is still open. And some of these towns, the buildings were made out of brick, like Boley or Taft. And a lot of those buildings are still standing, but we did not have a fire department here until much more recently. So this was a town with wooden sidewalks, had a well, had a little jailhouse, had a beautiful school. It was a 3-story brick building. And I don't know, did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. Okay, yeah, you getting there. You're doing a good job. There's no question about it. Let me ask you this. Okay, so you got a town. If your town is that small, let's say a mile or something like that, what is the next town next to your town? That's a
Oh,
white
this is
town?
rural. See, this is different than up there. Where you live in, there's not a lot of wide open spaces. That's why I love the West. Because I mean, being from Rhode Island, so many people and everything, you know, the way I describe New York to people down here is the shortest building is 6 stories tall. Okay.
Right.
Then they get the idea about New York. But down here, this is rural and this is hard country to settle. And this took a lot of work, and it's wide open spaces. I mean, prairie. And so they were all farmers, and they would put their cattle out all winter. They'd brand their cattle and they'd let them go all winter. And then in the spring, there'd be a certain date and somebody would say, well, I saw your cattle. They're over there behind that hill. You better, you know, because they got a little too far, and they'd go and get their cattle, bring them closer to town. But this was rural all around here. The best watermelons I've ever eaten in my whole life. The best peaches I've ever eaten in my whole life. And it's rural. So that the closest town is 5 miles away. That's Shakota. They would walk down the railroad tracks and go watch the movies and come back to Shakota. And then Muskogee, you know, proud to be an Okie from Muskogee, is about 15 miles north of here. And that's also on, see this dirt road, the Texas road that I was telling you about later became US 69.
Yeah.
69 is a truck route, and it gets 20,000 vehicles a day go up 69. So the dirt road's on this side of me. The old 69 is there, the creek, the railroad tracks, and just past that is New 69. And New 69, I mean, it's a highway. So Muskogee's on that, and it's still the major thoroughfare from Kansas City to Dallas.
I got you. Now,
so it's rural, so it's farmers, so that there wasn't a town right next door. No.
Let me ask you this. Now, okay, so they got a town there. When does the KKK and all the rest of them start messing with the black people in the town?
Okay, well, my understanding is that right after the Civil War, there was not a whole lot of that. And then after about 20 or 30 or 40 years, remember, everybody was getting elected and Reconstruction. And then there was a backlash from that.
Right.
And the backlash was sort of started in they had that first movie that was so racist.
Yeah,
okay. Right. And then after that, the Klan grew. So that was later. That was, I think, 1890, 1910, 1920, 1930, 1940, the Klan. And the Klan, DC and I went to the stacks over at the History Center and looked in the newspaper files. And there were articles in the 20s, you know, everybody run out of town in this town, and better not go to that town, and the Klan kills people here, and lynching over there in Okemah, and blah, 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 blah. And so it got worse kind of as a backlash, I think. I don't think, yeah. And so.
Did they come to the town and do their havoc? Did the Klan come to the town?
Oh, no, I don't think they bothered Reneesville.
Town, but when you come over on the other side of this street, it's fair game.
Well, now, not every town was a sundowner town. You know, the sundowner towns had the sign, black people better be out of town after sundown.
They had a
sign?
That
was after the sun. Some towns in this state are labeled to this day as they were a sundowner town. And what that means is there was a sign on the edge of town, not all of them by far. Yeah. Like Henrietta was one. I believe Norman, Oklahoma was one. They had a sign that said, you know, N-word, better be out of here after dark. And so that's why, you see, people say, well, a black town, why did they need a black town? Well, to me, the significance of these towns is that when you finally get a shot at doing your thing your way, you only need to prove to yourself one time that you can do this and your whole self-concept changes. And when you may have to move on later, you go with a new vision of what's possible. Okay. And what that means is that this was a turning point, in my opinion, for the whole culture, because where else? No Jim Crow laws. You could grow your own crops. You could get your own Black teachers in the school, and they were very strict, you know, very serious. This was a serious commitment. And your own churches, and just see what that would be like to do that. And these people were business people. Somebody told me, well, Black people were running their own businesses down on the plantations, you know. That's why we knew how to do business. So they just set up their shoe shop, whatever it was, you know, and had their businesses here. And they got so good at it that when wealth is grown by turning the money back into the same community and being segregated in Tulsa, instead of the money getting turned back into the community 8 or 10 times, like in a small town, it was like 100 times. And they got so wealthy. That's why I believe that massacre happened, because the white people around them were not near as wealthy and were jealous and just destroyed Tulsa. And then Tulsa built itself back. And this is the 100-year anniversary. And they called it a race riot, but it was not, in fact, a riot. They kept that word on there as long as the people were living that could have collected insurance. And the day that the last one passed away, they put the word massacre on it, which was the truth, because it was actually a planned attack. They say it happened by, you know, the crowd got all riled up because some guy in the elevator, blah, 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 blah. But in fact, I heard recently that there was a practice run done in one of the oil company towns a week or two earlier, maybe a month earlier, so that it was a planned attack on Tulsa.
Everybody in the town knows you because it's just that small of a town.
Oh, yeah. And his Aunt Ethel, you know, grabbed me and put me in the AME church choir right next to her and got me white clothes and everything. For 2 years I sang, and we did, you know, Sunday afternoon programs with the A&B selection in all the little towns around here. And so we started a grocery store, and I got to know everyone in town.
So how many people live in your town now?
Oh, it's about 130. When I got here, it was 60. They've grown it back up. A lot of people, if they can retire and come back here, they do. I'll tell you an interesting story about this. Okay, the school in the 50s, everybody had 3 years to move down to Shakota. They only took one of these teachers and started using it in Shakota, using that teacher in Shakota. Everyone else had to find a new kind of employment in the 50s. So, you know, desegregation in the 50s. So the school closed in the 50s. And all these people would come back and have a reunion and fix the cemetery. And if somebody died in Detroit or they died in LA, a week later, here would come the hearse out to the cemetery and they say, oh, you see, they'd go and plant so-and-so out there, you know, they're all buried out there. And then about in the 90s, one of these people that's lived here all these years started a Reneesville school reunion, okay? The school's been closed since the 50s. She started the reunion, 160 people showed up. So they're mostly people from out of town. And they're still doing that reunion.
I like it.
And
I like it.
You can see the importance of, that's what hit me to, you know, everybody has this sad story. There used to be these towns and the people moved away and the buildings fell down. However, what I noticed is when these people left, maybe they populated Oakland, maybe Inglewood. They come back from World War II. California looked good and they've become very professional. I have an exhibit about that. Principals of schools, teachers in colleges, running churches, tremendous accomplishments. 2 Harlem Globetrotters from these towns around the world. Somebody invented Smoke-A-Rama, which is a barbecue steamer, cooker, smoker, and it made $1 million business out of that. Tremendous accomplishments, not to mention the musicians, just to mention the professionals. So then I put this, DC used to say, well, we need a museum around here one of these days. So I finally started the museum about 5 years ago, and I have an exhibit called Impact and Accomplishment from Oklahoma, not just towns, but Black towns and communities. So that includes Okmulgee, Muskogee, Oklahoma City. And then I have the map. And then on the other side, I have an 8-foot map that's the musicians, is 135 or 40 musicians where they went. Lowell Fulson was born right outside of Tulsa. He's part
What's the
Choctaw.
name of the museum?
Oh, DC Minter Rentiesville Museum.
Okay.
It's in this building. This is all one building. This was the house, and they turned the carport into her grocery store, and she had another room that was her bar, cozy corner. And then it burned down, and she rebuilt in the 60s. So this is kind of a newish house, you know.
Okay.
And then when we put the music in it, it got too small really fast. And DC had built a garage back in the back, you know, about 30 feet by 30 feet. And so he hooked the house to the garage. So now we have a building that's 75 feet and 75 feet. It's an L-shaped building.
Okay.
And live in the back and the bar, and then way in the back on the other end is the museum.
And so besides the museum, you've also started a blues festival.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, let's tell us about
I didn't start that by myself. After we opened the bar in 88, well, I didn't know that it would be such a success. And, you know, our customers showed up at 2 a.m. Well, his grandmother always did run after hours. So we decided maybe we were supposed to be after hours too. So we would play from 9 to 5. That's 2 gigs, 9 p.m. to 5 a.m.
Wow.
And finally, after about a year, we shortened it to 10 to 4. And that was 91.
Okay.
And we had 7 bands on a Sunday afternoon. So then he said, well, now we're in the festival business. I said, well, what does that mean? So he turned in the farm pond, and then he spent 2 weeks building a fence around the place. And then he built the stage down at the far end of the field. And when he we're getting ready to have number 31 this year.
What's the name of the festival?
Reneesville, dusk till dawn, because we go all night.
What's the status of the town now? Is
it's very functional. It's functional. We still have the Baptist church here, which is quite active, and another church too. And the government, like I said, they had their elections just the other day. And the thing that's helped us is because the Battle of Honey Springs was across the street, the state realized that this is a unique history that was completely, you know, when DC was the kid, they didn't know the story. It was a history that was lost. He asked his grandma, he said, what happened out there, Grandma? She said, a bunch of Indians had a fight. Well, it was the diversity battle, the war, Civil War. There were a lot of natives on both sides and fighting brother to brother, and these black soldiers and everything. So like Bob Blackburn, who's head of the History Center, and then also this man here, put together a $3 million building across the street, and they which is the Honey Springs Visitor Center, and they've got the monuments and then trails up there, walking trails where you can go up and see this history. And so that's been a boost for this community. That's helped me. The USDA Rural Development said, well, knock, we're going to help you out, Selby. So now I have handicap accessibility and the exit signs and all of those things.
Oh,
and
that is beautiful.
So I think Rentiesville's in pretty good shape. I think Rentiesville is in pretty good shape. And I know Taft is, and I know Bowley is, and I know Clearview and Summit also. What?
Yeah, I said we're going to stop right there because I know we can go on. You got good history. Show us that T-shirt.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, show us the T-shirt.
Okay, Reneesville, dusk till dawn. And last year we were on the internet. If you click through at dcminerblues.com /about, you can see.
Okay, we got the website.
20 hours of music.
We got the website, we got the T-shirt. Everybody, I told you I'll find some interesting people.
This is the book that tourism people put together about all this history. And you can get it from me or from tourism.
Okay.
And it's Long Road to Liberty, and it talks about the Black towns. This is the book on DC. This is Blues Hall of Fame. We have the Blues Hall of Fame here. We've inducted 150 Oklahoma musicians. Amazing.
I love it. I love it.
Music from this state. And that's most of it. That's most of it.
Yeah. Okay, everybody, strong inspirations. Subscribe.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Hit the like button, hit the notification bell, read my movie, my book, watch my movie. Let's go to her festival. Y'all like blues. I got some blues people on my watching me. Let's go to the festival.
I'm sure you do.
We're gonna keep rocking and rolling, as they say. I thank you so very much for being on the channel. I thank my viewers for watching this once again. And to you, my sister, I will say this with all sincerity. I want you to stay strong. I want you to stay safe. Stay on your grind. We really appreciate what you're doing. we coming out there to sing some songs. And
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. It's an honor to be on your show, and congratulations for what you're doing.
Thank you so very much. With that, I'm saying goodbye. We out.
Good night. Goodbye.